team. For those of you who don't know, my name is Stephen Watson, and I have the privilege of being the president and CEO here at the National World War II Museum. All right, thank you. And New Orleans is really a central part of that story. Many people, as I'm sure you know if you're a local, are surprised to hear that the National World War II Museum is in New Orleans. This is the congressionally designated National World War II Museum, and it's right here in New Orleans. I think some of you also know that this museum was founded by the late Dr. Ambrose and his best friend, Nick Mueller. Now, Nick Mueller, who most of you probably were squinting to say, that doesn't look like Nick when I got up here, until very recently had been the only president and CEO of the National World War II Museum, now is the president and CEO emeritus. And he also is the vice chairman of the New Orleans and Tourism and Marketing Commission. And I want to recognize Nick. I think you're over here to my left. Where are you? Simply put, this museum would not be here if not for Nick Mueller. But their vision started a little more modestly. Their initial idea was known. What a fabulous, fabulous place to gather. Today is all about stories, and this is one of the great stories that will ever be created in the city of New Orleans. And it's telling perhaps the most important story of our generations, and that's the story of World War II. So we thank everyone who's associated with this fabulous enterprise. We have a number of NOTMC board members here. I can't see them in the light, and we were all sitting around before having cocktails and wine and whatnot. I would just ask all board members of the NOTMC, please just raise your hand so we can see and let everyone give you a round of applause. As you know, NOTMC is the public agency whose mission is to promote leisure tourism in our city. In effect, our job and our mission is to tell the stories that will get people to come to this great community. But even more importantly, our job is to create the story of jobs and employment, whereby our industry supports nearly 86,000 jobs in this metro area. And that in turn, together with the tourism that comes to this market, promotes nearly $8 billion of spend from tourists and locals alike in our hospitality industry, all of which helps fuel prosperity, fuel jobs, and create a much greater city. So that's a terrific story, and our job is to get it out there to the most amount of people that we can. We have partners. No one is more New Orleans than Mitch Landrieu. No one can tell the story of New Orleans better than our mayor, Mitch Landrieu. And no one can tell it with more personal passion and with more ethos in the marketplace than Mitch. He's just a fabulous spokesman. He has projected an image and backed it with the substance of...
Steve, thank you very much for welcoming us to the World War II Museum. Nick, thank you for working with your best friend to tell the story of Andrew Higgins and the greatest generation. You are really in one of the great spaces in the United States of America to tell the story about freedom, which, as we so often say, is not free. You have to earn it every day. And as the world gets more dangerous every day, from military threats to natural disasters, which always seem to be impending, it's worth taking a note that, you know, we're here celebrating men and women who were involved in a real world war. Hundreds, I mean, there was just so many people were killed, so many people sacrificed for the things that we have today, and so it's always a great joy and a great blessing to be able to come back here. On top of that, it is now the #1 tourist destination, clearly in the city of New Orleans and maybe in the entire southern region of the country. And so, as we like to say in the tourism industry, tourism means business. I know that tourism to some people looks like fun, but for us, the back of the house side of it, as Darryl said, provides 86,000 jobs. It's pretty much about a $5 billion piece of the state's economy just in the New Orleans metropolitan area, given all of the things that all of you do. So thank you for all of your work. I want to thank Scott Hutchinson, who's my deputy CEO that oversees culture, tourism. I want to thank Mark for, you know, when I called him and said, look, I need you I need you to lead the tourism industry for the city of New Orleans. And then I called Daryl and said, you're it too. You know, you need to be the chairman. I would give those guys a big round of applause. I'll just mention a couple of things to you and then talk about the tricentennial. But I've had, just today is quite a day. I was in Port Arthur yesterday with firefighters helping that city stand itself back up. It's completely devastated. We know what that feels like. And we have a lot of folks over in Houston, and we'll continue to be with them. Unfortunately, we have to start moving everybody back here because there's a young lady named Irma that's threatening the West Coast. We don't exactly know how that's going to go, but Florida seems to be in the crosshairs right now. I would ask you to pay attention and be vigilant because it's expected to turn away from us, but you never know. So we need to be ready. This morning, I had a long meeting with the governor and our emergency operation responders preparing for that. I drove back into town and just inaugurated class 181, one of our 400 new police officers that we started training for today, 181 and 182, who are going to do great work. And so we had hurricanes, we had police, and now we have tourism this afternoon. And it's not, they're not unrelated to each other. Safety and security, I probably should have planted it in Mobile, maybe should have planted it in Baton Rouge, but they picked this place, and they picked this place because of the river. And we have become one of the great port cities in the history. And there is no other place that has the richness of culture, that has the depth of diversity, that has the joie de vivre, and has both the joy and the pain of living that your city does. And as a consequence, not only have we been a hub for major businesses, not just in tourism, but in port and maritime and medical science and aeroscience. Very few people know this, but not too far from here at NASA, we build the fuel engines that take everybody out of space. We do that here in this city. And so this city has always punched above its weight. So a couple years ago, I started to conceptualize with a lot of other people, how are we going to celebrate our 300th anniversary? And we could have done the easy thing. We could have just said, let's have a party and invited a couple of dignitaries and lit ourselves a couple of candles. But we decided that what we were going to do was not build the city back the way it was. We were going to start building the city the way it should have been had we gotten it right the first time. And we were going to use our 300th anniversary to actually show off to the world a brand new school system that has not been replicated anywhere in the country. By the way, 33 brand new state-of-the-art knowledge-based learning centers that other kids in America dream to have. You have 55 primary new healthcare clinics in your city. You have 2 huge new hospitals downtown that are going to form the basis of the knowledge-based healthcare economy going forward. You have a new airport coming out of the ground. Thanks to Daryl and his work and a lot of other folks, you have an entire new riverfront coming out of the ground as we speak. You have massive investments in infrastructure. I think we've done over 1,000 capital projects. And we continue to do all of that, all the while being one of the greatest sports, entertainment, cultural centers that feed artists and cultural bearers and ambassadors that are second to none. And so what I had asked Mark and Daryl and the entire team to do is put together a marketing campaign that celebrates who we are, where we've been, where we are, where we're going, and celebrates our 300th anniversary as the city, not that we were, but the city that we always dreamed we could be. And I am thrilled to be here. They've been working on this for a really long time. They've been conceptualizing it for a long time. And Mark not only serves as the executive director of NOTMC, but he's actually leading with a lot of other folks the celebration of our 300th anniversary that will start in November at the First Lady Cheryl's Book Festival, which will kick off out at City Park. And then from there all the way through May 5th, the entire world will be here over that 7-month period of time. And of course, as you know, simultaneously therewith, we will inaugurate a new mayor, and we will hand over to the new mayor and to the new city council a city that is much better prepared than it ever has been, and one that the nation will be very proud of. So thank all of you for the work that you've done towards that goal. Today is the beginning of that, and Mark, thank you for all the work that you've done. Please help me welcome Mark Roman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Stephen, as well, and Daryl. And again, another round of applause for the National World War II Museum for hosting us today. Before I begin my remarks, I want to obviously thank you for coming, and also the selection of Mardi Gras footage that you saw as you walked into the room, to the BB Stage Door Canteen. today was taken from the early 1970s, and it was the courtesy of the Historic New Orleans Collection in the French Quarter, and it was shot by Jules Kahn. And these are just some of the great moments that will be celebrated by our tricentennial advertising campaign. So, this is a very joyous day for all of us. For 300 years, people have left New Orleans with a different kind of souvenir. They've left with great stories. It's what sets this city apart from so many others. People have left with stories of discovery and triumph, creation and rebirth, silliness and indulgence. They've gone home to tell their families about music they heard, a dish they tried, and friends that they made over drinks after midnight. They've left singing the praises of men and women, some of them brave and inspirational leaders, and others just ordinary citizens who have made the world a better place. But what's the common thread? New Orleans. And to drive tourists to our city during its tricentennial year, we're going to celebrate them all. Because for 300 years, great stories have started the same way. One time in New Orleans, for the first time in our city's history, our advertising will not be led by landmarks, attractions, or even events, of which we all know there are many, but by the great stories that come from them. It's the kind of stories tourists can expect to take home when they visit here. This One Time in New Orleans campaign was created by our agency of record, 360i. It is very extensive. What I'll show you today, though, is just only the beginning. But we believe over time, it'll attract today's evolving tourists, all ages, races, and creeds, who now value experiences over places and things, and will continue to grow the great many jobs that Darryl referenced earlier. We'll start by taking a look at our full-length commercial, along with September 11th, during the first Monday night football game, Saints versus the Vikings, on ESPN. All right, so let's go to the commercial.
Chap, chap, chap. One time in New Orleans, well, before it was even found, a French teenager scared away a British warship with just a story, and great stories kept coming. Some of them are epics, like when the military came here and built the boats to win the war. Some make you move, like when music fans discovered jazz, funk, and pop. But yeah, Johnny, but you know some of our stories aren't so straightforward. In fact, they make no sense at all. While others prove that great things can happen, even on a Monday night. The story of our city is the story of all of its stories, strung together like beads or rosaries, which some might call the same thing. Because for 300 years, great stories have started the same way. One time in New Orleans. Quite straightforward.
While authenticity would ultimately resonate with tourists considering us